My name is Leo Manggubat, and I am honored to moderate West Philippine Sea, Ecology, and Assertion, a very important discussion with some very distinguished guests. Before we start, I'd like to remind the German speakers in the audience that real-time translation of this talk is available on site. So just approach any one of the staff for assistance. Okay, so this panel, the West Philippine Sea dispute is not just a legal and geopolitical matter, but it's also about our people's stories of sovereignty, how the dispute has affected our marine environment, and the public perception of a large Filipino-Chinese community. So I'd like to introduce our speakers. So first we have Ipat G. Luna. So Ipat G. Luna has been engaged in environmental law and policy practice for over 3 decades. She has managed several foundations and organizations for the conservation of the environment. She's built local consensus on important policy decisions affecting natural resources and habitats, particularly in protected areas and wetlands. And she's published numerous works in these fields while working in various nonprofit organizations and their projects. She was designated as Undersecretary and later Regional Executive Director at the Calabarzon region of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And she was also detailed to the office of Deputy Speaker Lauren Legarda until August 2021. Ms. Luna is currently an independent consultant for various government policy initiatives, and she is a naturalist, a native tree enthusiast, a bird watcher, sourdough baker, and a trained rescue diver. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Ms. Ipat G. Luna.
Thank you, Leo.
Next, we have Charlson Ong. He's published 4 collections of short fiction, Men of the East and Other Stories, Woman of Amcao and Other Stories, Conversion and Other Fictions, and Of That Other Country We Now Speak. He has also published 5 novels, An Embarrassment of Riches, Banyaga, A Song of War, Blue Angel, White Shadow, White Lady, Black Christ, and The Arhat Sun. His short fiction has been compiled in Sojourner, Settler, Seer. He has won the Carlos Palanca Memorial Awards for short story in English, the Philippine National Book Award for both short fiction and a novel, as well as a Filipino Academy of Motion Picture Arts Award for Best Adapted Screenplay for Tabanata's Wife that he wrote, co-produced, and co-directed. He is a board member of the Philippine chapter of the International Pen. Ladies and gentlemen, Charlson Ong. And finally, we have Attorney F.D. Nicolas B. Pichay, who is a director of the Senate Legislative and Law Library of the Senate of the Philippines, specializing in intellectual property law, cultural heritage law, and right selling. He is also a published writer of plays, poems, and legal articles with a keen interest in the intersection of law, culture, and literature. His work reflects a commitment to safeguarding both the creative rights of authors and the cultural patrimony of the nation. His vision is to serve as a bridge between writers and publishers so that Philippine literary works may gain international recognition while being commercially protected. Ladies and gentlemen, Attorney Pichay. So I'd like to open the floor for the presentations of our panelists. So I believe, Ms. Ipat, you will be going first. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like for this to be more graphic because I think the arbitral award speaks for itself very, very well. It's more than 400 pages, I believe, and I would really like for it to be published as a book and translated to Filipino. Right now, it has pictures that graphically shows what happened to our reefs. And as much as this has been touted as a territorial conflict, it is not. It's under UNCLOS, which makes it a maritime conflict. And you will see later what the effect on the environment has been. Next slide, please. Ecology and Assertion. Next slide, please. This is the type of machine that China used. And this is actually part of the decision, part of the arbitral award. This is the machine that China used in building islands in the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, in reefs of the Philippines. This is the ocean floor. There is an anchor pole, and there is a sediment is broken up and sucked from the seabed And through that tube, material is transported through a floating pipe so that they can make dredged material deposited on an actual coral reef. This drawing is in the arbitral award itself. Next, please. This is also in the arbitral award itself. You can see the figures where they show the actual dredgers. This is the trailing suction of the hopper dredge and the Tianjinghao cutter suction dredge. You can see all of the dredgers at work on Mischief Reef. And this is Fiery Cross Reef. This was what it was in 2012. And within 3 years, it looks like this. And then figure 13, all you can find in the arbitral award itself. So I urge you, from page 319, it discusses the ecological disaster that was brought upon the seas. We call it West Philippine Sea, whatever you call it, the South China Sea, whatever you call it, it was a disaster that unfolded on these marine wealths. Figure 13 is Fiery Cross Reef, and you can see figure 14 is Subi Reef. So it's not just one, but multiple reefs in the Philippines. Next, please. The arbitral award was released on 12 July 2016. Again, I urge you to read pages 319 to 397. The conclusion was that based on the considerations outlined above, the tribunal finds that China has, through its toleration and protection of and failure to prevent Chinese fishing vessels engaging in harmful harvesting activities of endangered species at Scarborough Shoal, Second Thomas Shoal, and other features in the Spratlys Islands, breached Articles 192 and 194, paragraph 5 of the Convention. The first one is really fishing vessels that are of Chinese origin. This is not even part of the dredging activities. These fishing vessels were caught with endangered sea turtles and endangered giant clams. And then the tribunal further found that China has, through its island building activities at Quarteron Reef, Fiery Cross Reef, Gavin Reef, Johnson Reef, Hughes Reef, Subi Reef, Mischief Reef, 7 reefs in total, breached Articles 192, 194, 1945, 197, 123, and 206 of the Convention. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions about this, so I'm going to keep it short. But the next slide, please. This is the BRP Sierra Madre. It was grounded in one of the reefs of the Philippines in order for us to keep having a foothold in our waters. And China has continuously tried to stop supply ships from Philippine boats supplying our soldiers there in the BRP Sierra Madre. Next, please. Recently, China approved the establishment of a nature reserve in Bajo de Masinloc. This was just 11 September 2025. And the Philippines urged China to respect the sovereignty and jurisdiction of the Philippines over Bajo de Masinloc. This is very close to Luzon already. Refrain from enforcing and immediately withdraw its State Council issuance and comply with its obligations under the international law, particularly the 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the final and binding 2016 South China Sea Arbitral Award, and the 2002 Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea. The establishment of a nature reserve will stop the fishermen of the Philippines further through law. Right now, they're just being scared off the reefs from fishing. And this will be the final nail in the coffin to stop artisanal fishermen from using the resources in our exclusive economic zone. So the Philippines, although in my field, I would always say yes to a nature reserve, but this is actually just a geopolitical move to ensure that they have some sort of legal authority because they have never accepted the arbitral award and keep saying that it is null and void. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ipat. I believe Charlson is the... Oh, sorry. Attorney Nicolas, will you be the next?
Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Good afternoon to everyone. Guten Abend, I think is the phrase. That's the only phrase I know in German. Maybe ich liebe dich. But that's it. I don't want to murder your language any further. So this is Charlson Ong, and that's Nicolas Pichay. And this is my presentation. I have 4 slides to show you, all illustrations. May I have the first, the cover slide? The title of my short talk is A Cartography of Worlds, or A Cartography of Words. No? So as a playwright, first slide. This is the, what do you call this? The coat of arms, yes, thank you very much. A coat of arms that was presented to Juan Sebastian Elcano, who circumnavigated the world with Ferdinand Magellan. No? It says, Primos circumdidiste me. You are the first to encircle me. And this betrays the idea of the world as a virgin territory that men encircle. Now, that's how I interpreted it. And this was my first springboard for the writing of a musical that was commissioned to me by the National Historical Commission of the Philippines with regard to the story of the circumnavigation of the world. No? There was a time when people thought that the world was flat. And I think in some other jurisdictions, they still believe that. Despite the fact that many, many years have passed by. And in fact, there is a quincentennial celebration of the circumnavigation of the world. The Philippines figures prominently in this circumnavigation because when Magellan's crew began their trip to the east and then ended up in the same place in the west, they finally discovered a route to the Spice Islands. And in between that trip, they accidentally strayed towards the island now known as Mactan. And Magellan presented to one of the datus there that the people, the inhabitants of Mactan, should pay tribute to King Philip. And this datu, named Lapu-Lapu, did not want to do that because he said, I guess, I wasn't there when he said it, but I sort of like figured, what the hell? Why will I pay a tribute to your king? First of all, he's far away. I don't know him. And second, this is my place. This is my home. So they had a battle. And then, of course, Magellan was sculpted to death. So next slide. One of the other things that I looked into when researching for the musical was the Murillo Velarde map, which you can see here. It's a beautiful, beautiful map. I have not seen the original, but there are several copies, and I understand that since the 17th or 18th century, this map was going around and around the antique stores because it was beautifully drawn. No? There is a map of the Philippines in the center, and on the sides, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there are 12 sort of like squares, no? And it tells you it's a drawing of the inhabitants of the islands and also some of the buildings and also some of the activities there. So there are indigenous peoples, there are images of business being conducted in a city, etc., etc. Okay? The map helped me contextualize the relevance of Lapu-Lapu, a datu who resisted who resisted Magellan, who later on became the symbol of colonialism with regard to national consciousness. This is because the idea of maps capture the dynamic power that is relevant to books and literature, so that the images of the various ethnic groups that inhabited the archipelago, together with the drawings of the cities, are not mere ornamentation in my sense. No? They are a visual census. The map becomes a landscape of place and a portrait of people, not from their sense, but from the lens of the conquerors. It is therefore for me parts geography and another part, imagination, how we are imagined by a foreign gaze. Also, a map in the hands of a military mind is an aid to conquest and war. And it's self-explanatory that we will attack on this place, we will corner them in this place, and the first thing that they have to consult is a map. The drawing of the Murillo Velarde map was evidence to how the islands were first charted, not only on paper, but on the colonial mind. So how did the Spaniards looked at the islands? The cartographer's hand, therefore, transformed shores familiar to its native inhabitants into extensions of empire, translating geography into a land title that can be governed for status, traded for profit, and sold as war booty, as they did when they sold the islands to the Americans pursuant to the Treaty of Paris. We can also say that the act of mapping is not only a product of a cartographer's measurements, because in a poetic sense, writing is also a way of charting places and people. And that reading is our way of journeying to terra incognita. Even now, in geography, we are talking about directions, and the directions have meaning. When we say you are from the north or you are a country that is in the south, it holds meaning more than the geographic sense. It means that you are either rich or you are either poor. In a map, the cartographer reflects the real. In the reader, it conjures a world that takes meaning on its own. In a map, the cartographer chooses the elements that will make his drawing useful, but at the same time, in the same map, it is read with the reader's own act of biases. And therefore, if you see this map, for example, you will say, oh, how uncivilized some people are. They don't wear anything. They are naked. A map conjures the real and the poetic one. In this sense, it is a form of narrative, of storytelling, of identity and aspirations. In the case of the Velarde map, it turned the sea into a border instead of something that will connect, and the islands into possessions. We were owned. And so even before the Philippines succumbed to colonial rule, first by Imperial Spain and then by the United States, its people were presented as types, archetypes, exotic beings in the margins of a map. Its geography translated into the language of conquest. Okay, next slide. And so we come to the China's 9-dash line. This is China's imagination of where they are in relation to the Philippines. As you can see, I mean, this is just a rough estimation of what it is. But as far as the law, the UNCLOS is concerned, this is within the 400 meters that is allowed by law to be exploited only by the country that has the islands within its jurisdiction. The images of natives in costumes are observations by one culture over another based on certain held assumptions over what it means to be civilized. And the power of these observations are strengthened by the act of repetition, shaping not only how Europe or the United States or China imagines us, but how we, by osmosis, imagine ourselves. And therefore, when the Spaniards came, they said the Filipinos were lazy because they didn't work during noontime. Of course, we didn't work. 2 minutes. And then finally, okay. You know, the ruling, the ruling of the arbitral committee is more than a legal victory. It was a reclamation of the map. It is how we embody ourselves and tell other people, no, you can't do that because this is what we are and this is where we are. Where once our lands and waters were drawn by others, we have now learned to draw the lines by ourselves, grounded not in myth or imagination, but in law and in principle. And yet, we are reminded that even in our own time, maps remain fragile instruments of peace. Across the world, in Gaza, for example, in Palestine, we see another struggle over land and belonging, over borders and the right to name one owns home. It is a painful reminder that maps can both divide and define us, that beneath every line drawn on paper are human lives, histories, hopes that resist containment. One last paragraph. In the natural world, geography is in constant flux, more evident now because of climate change, and so too are maps. But as long as we look at the world as mere possession rather than shared ecology, there will always be possession and exclusion. And that is, I think, literature's imperative, to be the constant reminder for humans of the dangers of greed, the importance of memory, and to think of the future way beyond our mortal selves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Pichay. And now I'd like to call on Mr. Charlson Ong.
Hello, this is Don. Yeah, good afternoon. I think I was invited to this panel because I have a Chinese-sounding name, and they didn't know what else to do with me. But anyway, we've been talking about the diaspora past few days, the Filipino diaspora. Before that diaspora, there was the other diaspora several hundred years ago, almost 1,000 years ago, and that is the diaspora of the Southern Chinese to Southeast Asia, you know, and many of the modern nation states were created, you know, partly by the activity of this diaspora. Through the Mestizo and the Peranakan communities. In the Philippines, actually, despite our proximity to China, we're the closest. That's why we have all these problems now with China. We have the smallest Chinese population. There's always been a large Mestizo class, but those who will culturally identify as Chinese still speak some form of the language are always small, maybe 1 to 2%. You know? So we never had the numbers to threaten the establishment. You know? But of course, some would say an inordinate influence, if not control, you know, of the economy. And so and it was very difficult to become a Philippine national in the past, until ironically 75, when Marcos just used his decree to make, because he was going to recognize the PRC, and you know, all of these nationals who would be technically nationals of what was still then a ideological foe. So the solution was, you know, make them Filipinos. You know? So that was when most of the Chinese became Philippine nationals, and that sort of bumped up property cost. Anyway, so there's always been this. So basically, the community just paid off, you know, the authorities most of the time. And then, not very long ago, there was a spate of kidnappings again. No? That was mainly involving the Chinese. When I was growing up, there was very little representation of the Chinese in media, in literature. In literature, perhaps the oldest one would be in Rizal, no? In El Filibusterismo. You have a Chinese character named Quiroga, whom Rizal was rather satirized. No, he had everyone in his pocket. No, he had Everyone owed him something, all the officials. So Simon, who was fomenting revolution, knew who to deal with. In a sense, Quiroga was the one who had no illusions. He was the one who knew what was really going on. Okay. And then, so that was Quiroga. And then when I was a boy, there was this caricature of Akong, a Filipino who played the Chinese caricature who would speak in pidgin Tagalog. I would be amused by him, on TV. But every time my grandmother, who was an immigrant, came into the room, would switch channels, on TV because she didn't like it. And then in 75, there was a movie made by our national artist who passed away, Lino Broca, based on a novel called Maynila sa Kukot ng Liwanag, Manila in the Close of Light, where there's a Chinese character. There's a kept woman lured into Manila and ends up being a kept woman of a Chinese person, and her boyfriend comes to Manila, and the woman dies, so he suspects the Chinese killed the woman, so he goes to Chinatown and murders him, with a ice pick, a very bloody scene. And that was the first time the Chinese person is actually shown on the big screen. And, it was slaughtered. So it was shocking. It was traumatic for me, for my generation. But fast forward, later on, the Chinese started making movies. So we have she just passed away, Mother Lily, who was one of the big producers in Philippine cinema. Eventually, she started making movies about her life, her family. And it became a franchise, Mano Po, 7 or 8 films. And here now you have ethnic Filipino actors speaking, in Chinese, in Hokkien. So there has been change, in that sense. When I was in 1998, I wrote a novel called "An Embarrassment of Riches," that was set in a fictional island, called the Victorianas, that resembles the Philippines. It's my riff on Rizal, anyway. So when the dictator dies, they call for elections. And the one who wins the elections is the heiress of a Chinese person who owns the biggest mall in the country. It's called Megalomolia, and it's huge, and it hires everyone. Everyone works for him. She wins the elections, and the first thing she does is to move the presidential office to her mall, because her feng shui master says no, that the old palace is very bad feng shui, so you move it to your mall. And also there's a heliport there, so it's for her security. But anyway, it sparks, of course, a lot of unrest, and the ending is a bit of a riff on the El Filibusterismo. So anyway, again, fast forward, my latest novel called The Arhat Sun, because I've said since the Chinese are in popular cinema and all that, a lot of that ground has been covered. But now there's a new dynamic, because since in 1949, when China became communist, it closed. Before that, the immigration to the Philippines was just regular, constant. So the relatives would come, they would be under the suasion of the community. They had to behave, because they could not embarrass their family, so they were under control. But that stopped in 49. So in the 80s, when China opened up again, people started coming back. But they were no longer, they were different. Some of them were not even Southerners. Some of them were not related to anyone in the Philippines. Anyway, they started coming back first as labor. But with China's very fast growth, and then Most of them were now bringing capital. There were investors. There were also drug lords. There were also gamblers, crime. So now there's this new dynamic, and the local community didn't like them in general. No? We used to sneer at them for being uncouth and provincial, but now they drive around in Porsches and Jaguars. So anyway, there was always this competition. So basically, my new book, I thought I had to deal now with this new phenomenon. And so the book has a character named Aloysius Ong, who was a Jesuit priest in China, who who left with his mentors in 49, comes to the Philippines, decides he doesn't want to be a priest anymore, goes into business, becomes a taipan, and then his son, Ignatius Ong, in 1989, he goes to China, has an affair with a woman during the Tiananmen incident, and he leaves. No, he was afraid. He leaves, and then fast forward decades later, his own son, Junior, dies, and so his junior, who he doesn't like because he's a do-nothing, is now the heir. No? And then the guy shows up, who calls himself Simon, who works for Pogos, and he says, "I'm your son, that you had with the woman back then." Because he fled and the woman was actually arrested and gave birth to him in jail and all that. And so the father wants to believe. He wants to believe because his favorite son is dead. Now it's the idea of the Arhat son. But of course, Junior doesn't believe him and said, so that's the... And then this Simon guy says, but I have another friend, who's actually a princeling. So you know the term, no? The son of a cadre and then he sails around in his yacht all over in Philippines, and then so he arranges a meeting between Junior and this guy, and then so this man makes him a proposal. He says, that, okay, briefly, just 1 minute. So the Chinese is imploding, so there's no other way for it to survive except to have a new ideology, and we have to make it Catholic. And you guys are the ones who can do this. And so that's a proposal he makes to Junior. Of course, it doesn't work out the way he plans. You have to buy the book to read it.
Thank you, Charlson. Yes, I'd like to thank our speakers for giving us these different perspectives on a very contentious topic. So whether ecological, metaphorical, geographical, and literary pop culture. Now I'd like to open the floor to any questions from the audience. Yes, someone will be approaching you with a mic.
Hello. I cannot profess to be as eloquent as our speakers today. Thank you so much for bringing not just this perspective, but the clarity, what's really happening on the ground to our nature. It's our planet. It's our shared planet. No matter the skin color, no matter the passports that we have. And also, yes, to put the perspective as well, that we create meaning with maps and we can oppress with maps and with words. And to be honest, I just also want to say, I'm Filipino, I have Chinese heritage, and now I've been in Germany for 10 years. What am I? Where am I? It doesn't matter. Throughout these past few days, we have been showing alliance with the oppressed as journalists, whether it's in the Philippines or in Gaza. We show our brotherhood and our sisterhood with people of whether Muslims or Christian within the Philippines, Mindanao or Luzon or from Manila. We've been doing this. And also, I've been to many panels on LGBTQ. It doesn't matter where we are from, whether from Philippines or the other countries, there is the oppressed and there is the oppressor. The Chinese people as well is not represented by one guy, one party that is the oppressor. I don't want to kick the tiger in the today, but I just want to say, we are all one and fighting for justice. And what I like now that I am in Germany, the first line of their constitution. It's not about defining who the people are, what the land is, as other constitutions are written. The first line, the worth of a person is an untouchable. And what is happening here is the crossing of that, of the touching of the worth of a person, whether it is this nation or other parts of our nation. So I just want to say, like, thank you so much for sharing all of this, but I also want to say Filipino-Chinese are Filipinos, and we are proudly so. Sometimes we've had a very tough experience because of a context and also other minorities, but we just want to say thank you so much for putting this front and center, this issue of like how we are being oppressed by another oppressor again. Whether it was a dictator, in this case, another dictator in a different country. So hopefully we can find a solution to stand up together.
Thank you so much. Do we have other questions?
Hi, thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. My question is to Attorney Past. I'm an ecologist and geologist, so I'm very interested. It's very close to my heart in relation to the coral reef there. So my question only is that, is China actually not answerable to the Convention on Biological Diversity of UN, since they are the ones who first ratified that convention? So I wonder what's the status in relation to this.
I don't think it has been brought up, but this award is under the UNCLOS, and it detailed that China, with its own laws, even prohibits the types of fishing in its own laws that they did in our reefs. That they clearly had EIA laws, and they did not have EIAs for these activities. They happened within a span of 2012 to 2015, 3 years, and the speed with which this happened, really, China would claim in press releases, not in the tribunal because they did not participate, that they did it with a lot of care and concern for the environment. But there are 2 scientific reports that the tribunal considered that looked at the direct ecological impacts of dredging and then building the islands. And it was, the reports were pretty clear as to the ecological damage. It was even quantified. I don't know if there is adjudicative measures that can be done under the CBD. There is no court, but the UNCLOS definitely there is. So this specifically, I think it should be pursued. But during the time this decision was issued, we were pivoting towards China. Our president was pivoting towards China. So during his entire presidency, where we had extrajudicial killings and late night press conferences that had bad language being shoved down the throats of journalists and even kids, that was a point at which this was not, the Philippines itself did not honor this award. And we only started to celebrate the yearly milestones. It's now the 9th year since this award was issued. And we've only just recently started to celebrate the date at which the award was issued. But as in international law, it's soft law, there really is no direct means by which to ensure that the decision is implemented.
Yes, attorney, would you also like to give a legal assist? Okay. Yes, do we have any other questions from the audience? All right. Okay, I have one. So Filipinos, ordinary Filipinos, usually get wind of this topic from a very geopolitical lens, you know. But through these talks, you've discussed the ecological perspective, the historical perspective, and even the literary perspective. Do you think that these perspectives are more productive in when you try to approach this issue, at least for Filipinos, to help them deal with what's happening? I'd like your thoughts on that as well. Yes, Attorney Nick.
I'm not quite sure how to respond to that question, except that maybe the point is when the nine dash line came out, it was a rallying point for a lot of Filipinos. And the reason behind that was that not only did it destroy resources that everyone should be able to enjoy, but it deprived real people from doing what they do to make a living. The fishermen were, dashed out of those sea lanes. To this day, and they cannot fish there without some kind of bigger boat from China who prevents them from doing that. So when I say something poetic about the map or how the map defines us from the point of view of other people, for this particular situation, I think that foreign gaze was felt right away. So my point was merely to say, this is what you did, and maybe this is the reason why you feel that way.
Sir Charlson, would you also like to add anything?
Well, as a writer, I have my apprehensions about what is going on, because society is fragile. You scratch the surface of any society and it's racist. And it takes very little to create trouble, And you see that in discourses online. It's very easy to draw a broad stroke. You're all Chinese, right? The nuances then become clouded over. And it can become dangerous. Yeah. So I think we might be walking on thin ice in a bit. Yeah.
Thank you. So what a very somber way to end our discussion. If there are any, do we have any final questions to lighten the mood or to end in a more hopeful mood? But if none, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this very important discussion. I hope you all picked up something. And let's give a hand to our panelists for today. Thank you so much.